just trying to survive and learn to love along the way, by Foreplay on AO3. Episode 121, Chapter 121, Of Pressure and Knives. The pressure is quick to become too much, so Eijirou has no choice but to open his mouth and let go. The villain drags him away from Shigaraki, and Eijirou coughs, doing his best to get the blood out of his mouth. It doesn't do much. The metallic taste of blood lingers no matter how much he spits and coughs. They don't drag him too far, just a few feet of biting range. Now on his side, Eijirou has a much better view of everyone else from here, but no one is paying the others much attention. Realizing the lack of danger the others are in, Eijirou starts to struggle. He can't move much with his hands tied and body pinned by those above him, but there are some well-placed elbows that make a few of the villains step back. Let's just kill him. A few people cheer at the suggestion. Eijirou is sure his heart stops, but he does his best to keep struggling, not willing to make this easy for them. If he has to die, then he's going down swinging. Wait. Eijirou freezes at the sound of his teacher's voice. Everyone else does too. Aizawa-sensei hadn't said a word since they'd been captured, and it's enough to make the villains stop what they're doing. Oh, and what do I get if I spare the brat? Shigaraki casually walks in Eijirou's direction. Just a little closer and he could do something. A few more steps, and Shigaraki will once again be within biting range. Eijirou is so focused on the movements of the man in front of him, he no longer pays any attention to the man behind him. That changes when they push him onto his stomach, and he barely avoids breaking his nose on the concrete. But by then, it's too late, and something starts pressing down on his head from above. Eijirou does his best to look out of the corner of his eye, and has to blink black tears at what he finds. Shigaraki stands over him, the boot on his side of his head, gaining pressure with every second that passes. Anything. Eijirou does his best to ignore the growing pressure and focuses back on his teacher. Well, there is one thing I can think of. Shigaraki steps away, but the other villain is quick to replace the boot with his hand, scraping his face on the concrete as he does so. You're gonna want to check his wrist. A group of men rush over. Sure enough, when they roll him over, Katsuki is nearly broken free of the rope. Instead of adjusting it, one of the men stands and simply points a finger at him. Nothing happens for a second, but then vines are breaking through the concrete and wrapping Katsuki up, efficiently subduing him. His boyfriend yells at the action, but there's nothing to be done. The group stays where they are, adding another level to the threat of their lives. After what seems like forever, Shigaraki comes to a stop in front of Aizawa-sensei. His teacher stares back at the villain, not betraying a single emotion. At least, not until there's a press of something sharp on Eijirou's neck. He can't help the scared whimper that escapes. It has Aizawa-sensei looking over, and the way his eyes tightenly betray just enough. This is too perfect. Shigaraki starts laughing. Don't move, or they'll slit his throat. Shigaraki squats down in front of Aizawa-sensei and pulls out a wicked-looking knife. The villain doesn't hesitate before pressing it to the skin below his eye. This quirk of yours is nasty business. It's not something I want in my new world, so I'll just get rid of it the old-fashioned way. Oh God. Is he going to cut Aizawa-sensei's eyes out? That's not something he could bear to watch, so Eijirou shuts his eyes. Open him back up, twerp. This is something you should see. The pressure on his head increases until Eijirou complies. Unfortunately, everyone is still in the same position. Eijirou stares at the back of Shigaraki's head instead of his teacher, and that's the only reason he sees it. Seconds before the villain is due to plunge the knife in his teacher's eye, there's suddenly a knife protruding from his neck. It doesn't seem to faze Shigaraki. He slowly stands, but when he reaches his full height, Shigaraki grasps the handle and pulls the knife from his own neck. Eijirou can only watch in mortification, as his wound seems to stitch itself back together. Shigaraki turns, and Eijirou follows his gaze to the source of the knife. Yaoyorozu and Uraraka stand there, doing their best to look unafraid. The former must have used their quirk to make a knife and cut the ropes. None of the villains have been paying them any attention, so they had just chosen the right moment to strike. Thank God they chose right. Aizawa-sensei doesn't look the least bit surprised, because there is no way he hadn't been keeping an eye on them. Kill them. Shigaraki stalks away from their teacher. The knife at his neck moves, and Eijirou activates his quirk just in time to avoid having his throat slit. The blade bounces harmlessly off his hardened skin, but the villain is quick to drag it back down. Eijirou is able to protect himself a second time, but he knows he won't be able to a third. His quirk is out now, worked well past the point of exhaustion. He shuts his eyes as the blade comes down once again, bracing himself for the inevitable pain. Except, it never comes. Instead, the weight that had been insistently pressuring down on him vanishes, and a familiar cloud winds itself around his leg. Eijirou opens his eyes, and stares up in shock as Blackwhip, holding his attackers back. He could only look for a second before being pulled away by Aizawa-sensei's capture weapon. He magically maneuvers around all the villains before landing softly in his teacher's arms. Eijirou looks up in time to see his eyes widen. Aizawa-sensei then turns, dropping low, and pressing Eijirou close to his chest. The only noise he could register for a moment is their harsh breathing, but then there's a loud crack, and both of them tense. When nothing else happens, Eijirou dares to peer over Aizawa-sensei's shoulder. There's only a couple of inches from impaling himself on his teacher's back. It's the crazy knife that Shigaraki has been threatening him with. The only reason it hasn't made contact is the large wall of ice blocking their view from everything else. Eijirou makes a noise of surprise that Aizawa-sensei is looking back as well. The sight of the knife, his teacher stands carefully and backs them away before slowly lowering Eijirou to the ground. Aizawa-sensei pulls out his own knife and cuts away Eijirou's bonds. Eijirou ignores the pain from the strain in his shoulders and pulls his arms forward to inspect them. He winces at the sight of blood and rope burns from all of his struggling, and elects to avoid the rubbing the feeling into them for now. Eijirou opens his mouth to thank his teacher for rescuing him, but the look in his face stops him. Aizawa-sensei is clearly listening to something. His teacher throws himself in front of Eijirou, seconds before the ice shatters. Wow, okay. I'm concerned. Like, really concerned. Because, like, what the hell? Hopefully nothing bad happens. The next chapter is called Of Useful Quirks and a Rescue Attempt. Why does it say attempt? Izuku hurries back into the burning dorms with a few extra in tow. This chapter has mild violence. It briefly mentions the events from the last chapter from Izuku's point of view. Okay, so, obviously, you know, I really do not like the fact that Aizawa, his eyes almost got cut off. It'd be an interesting fanfic, though. A blind Aizawa. Hear me out. Blind Aizawa and then Vigilante Izuku. Right? Aizawa is now rendered quirkless, and Izuku has been quirkless the whole time. They meet each other and they realize the difference between being born quirkless and being made quirkless are two different ways that society views you. They view Aizawa as this poor person who got, you know, their quirk taken away from them. They get you know, pitied, basically. Pitied. Sorry, I'm grabbing my thingy. They get pitied, while Izuku gets shamed for being quirkless. Instead of the whole, oh, you have to be, you know, without your quirk, you have to be in a world of quirks without a quirk, I feel so bad for you. It's, you're a shit, horrible, useless, worthless Deku, get the fuck out, kill yourself. Sorry, I went sidetracked. I'm scared. And, I'm rambling and I'm yapping because I don't know what else to do. I think we're rearing the end of, like, okay, it's gonna start looking forward. It's gonna start looking upwards. I hope. Fingers crossed. Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.